Good morning, everybody. The time is 10:02. Today is, hold on one sec. I dropped on my paperwork. It's March 2nd, 2023, and I call the planning board meeting to order. We have the following board members with us today. We have Vice Chair Bailey.
Good morning.
We have Commissioner Washington.
Morning.
And Commissioner Giraldo.
Good morning.
I'm Chair Shapiro. As we move forward to the business at hand, please note that the deadline for all participant pre-registration and for all submission of materials and exhibits was 12 noon on the Tuesday before this planning board meeting. Registered speakers may join the meeting with the link provided in the email provided by the planning board office or listen by phone by utilizing the call-in number provided in the email. And of course, anyone may tune in to watch the planning board meeting via live stream. If you wish to speak or become a person of record, you may use our online web form, which is referenced on the screen in front of you. In addition to the commissioners, we are joined by our Deputy Planning Director, Derek Berlage, Delisa Coleman, our Senior Counsel, Jessica Jones, our Planning Board Administrator, Joe Parsons, our Senior Technical Hearing Writer, James Hunt, the Division Chief for the Development Review Division, and staff members Kenneth Flanagan and Ryan Croner helping us with technology behind the scenes as always.
Chair, this is David Warner. Delisa is having some technical difficulties, so we're working on it, but we can continue.
All right, and we have David Warner with us, who is our Senior Counsel.
Principal,
right,
but close enough. I am old,
no.
but yes.
Right. David Warner, the Senior, who is our Principal Counsel.
Exactly.
And old.
And old, right. Okay, we're having a morning, folks. So the first item on agenda, item 2, I would look for a motion to approve the draft minutes of February 23, 2022.
Move to approve,
Move
Mr.
approval.
Chairman.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. If there's no discussion on the motion, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Our next item, we're going to go into legislation. We have items 3A1 and 3A2. We have our General Counsel, Deborah Borden, who will be giving a staff presentation on these 2 pieces of legislation. 3 of them. We have item 3A3 as well. I don't know if we're taking them all 3 up or not. Ms. Borden, are you on the line? Ms. Coleman?
I'm in. Success, finally.
Oh, congrats. I don't see Ms. Borden. We will take this up later in the agenda when she gets here. So let's move on to item 3.
I'm here.
I'm here.
Oh, Deborah.
Yes.
Yes, I'm trying to
Take your
my
time.
audio.
Yeah, we got an echo, but take your time. There's no rush.
Okay. Okay, is
Okay,
that
is that better?
We
Yeah.
still hear an echo. We hear you twice.
Shoot. Aha, I know what I need to do. Turn off.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can. Perfect.
Yes.
That's better.
Wonderful. Thank you. If I can go forward, Mr. Chair, are we ready?
Yeah, we are ready, and we're looking at item 3A. We have 3 items that you're bringing to us, legislative items, but are we considering all 3 today, or are you taking one of them off? I can't remember.
Actually, we're taking the middle one off. The stream restoration bill, we were only able to get a meeting with the sponsor yesterday. And so after that conversation, we really rethought and reconsidered our recommendation to take a position on that. So we want a bit more time to consider, what we heard from her. And so we may bring that back to you next week. So we'll just talk about the 2 bills. So the first one is HB 797. That, if you recall, was one of a group of bills that was filed by Senator Kramer dealing with just the Park and Planning Commission. This is the collective bargaining bill. So this bill is specifically related to mid-cycle bargaining, and it includes in the land use article dealing with our collective bargaining process. It includes a requirement for us to do binding arbitration for those mid-cycle bargaining. So if we reach an impasse and we can't come to an agreement with our unions, it would require us to go to binding arbitration. The amendment that's before you is an amendment that we crafted with our labor counsel, Craig Ballou, and we crafted this out of language that is already in the Montgomery County Code. So this is the same provision that the Montgomery County employees are subject to, and it simply says that any arbitration decision, any decision by an arbitrator would be subject to approval by the two county councils, the Montgomery and the Prince George's County councils, if it involves any term or condition that requires an appropriation of funds or the enactment or adoption of any regulation, or which has or may have a present or future fiscal impact. So we think that this is fair, that this is a good compromise, even though we didn't necessarily think that the bill was necessary, but we could live with this language because it treats us similarly to the county employees. I'll stop there in case you have any questions.
So the staff recommendation is to change to either support with amendments or take no position on this. That's correct? Yes. To support with amendments. Well, this is the amendment we hope that you will support. Yes. So, colleagues, you've heard the staff recommendation. Any questions about this? Any questions about the amendments that they're suggesting? Nope. Okay. So we are good to go. I would look for a motion to approve the staff recommendation with amendments or take no position. But essentially,
Motion
it's the
to
amendments.
approve. Motion to approve staff recommendation with amendments.
Second.
Got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, second by Commissioner Giraldo. Ms. Borden, I want to make sure that the motion is providing what you need. Is the motion adequate that we're supporting with amendments, or do we need to say support with amendments or no position?
No, support with amendments is preferable. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so the motion as stands. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. And we're moving past 3A2 as discussed, and we're moving to item 3A3, Ms. Borden.
Yes, thank you. SB 526. This is the rather impactful, shall we say, amendment to the State's Forest Conservation Act. We have sort of come from a place where we thought we might be able to get this as a summer study. And we have it on good authority from several members of our delegation that the General Assembly is determined to pass something on the Forest Conservation Act this session. And so we have switched gears and worked on a number of proposed amendments. We've also been in very close contact with the Prince George's County Executive, who is very concerned about this bill because it could impact significantly certain projects that are in the works in Prince George's County, particularly the Blue Line Corridor project, particularly our ability to do the FBI headquarters. And so they are very keen on making sure that this bill is amended such that it can be beneficial to Prince George's as well as their efforts to do economic development. So what we are proposing is that you allow us to engage and sit at the table for these amendments in talking with the stakeholders and the sponsors. And I want to just sort of boil this down to 3 items, really. So there is the ratio. We would like authority to agree to up to a 1-to-1 ratio. That is a significant increase in what the state minimum is right now. The state minimum is 0.25, so 1/4 to 1 acre minimum replacement of forest. We would like to say that the minimum should be 1 acre to 1 acre to get us to a no net loss program in the statewide. We think we can get there as long as we can do it in either a phased in approach over, say, 4 years, or we can do it in conjunction with a grandfathering clause. Either way, we think that that would work, that could be rolled out, excuse me, that could be rolled out across the state without too much disruption. The second pillar of this is that we need our retention banks back. And so we need them to back off on the restrictions on using retention bank credits to mitigate your clearing or clearance of forest. And the third is that we need them to back off a bit on the variances. Sorry about that. Which have, according to the original draft of SB 526, the variances would be extremely difficult to get, and they would be required for almost everything. So, it's not practical to have that, and it really sort of undercuts what we're trying to do with the ratio. So those are the 3 things that we would like to negotiate and negotiate those particular details. It's our understanding that those 3 things are very much in line with what the county executive in Prince George's wants to do as well. So we are in lockstep with them. The other thing that I want to mention is that the original bill talked about, it set up a system where you have a baseline for the entire state, a baseline ratio, a baseline whether everybody can use retention banks, et cetera. And then it has the opportunity for local jurisdictions to define and design their own local programs that, as long as they reach no net loss, as long as that is the goal and the realization of those programs, they can do it their own way. So, for instance, Montgomery has been working on their own program for about 18 months. They are very close to getting finished with it. And it would be a no net loss program, but it's going to be it's going to be a 0.5 replacement credit. Replacement ratio. So it's not going to be a 1-to-1, but that's okay because they're doing other things that will get them to 1-to-1, and they can demonstrate it. They can demonstrate it with, actual numbers from actual developments that have actually happened. So we want to make sure that that stays in the bill, and we want to refine that a little bit to make it clear what DNR has to do in terms of reviewing those and approving those and making sure that they are effective. We need to, for instance, extend the period of time for DNR to approve those because DNR only has so many people, and there are, quite a lot of jurisdictions in the state that might want to do a local program. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions. But what I'm looking for today is the ability to go and do this negotiation, engage in this negotiation within those parameters that I just talked about.
Just to be clear, that what I have in my notes is that the motion would be to approve the proposed amendments and staff recommendations to support with amendments. But it sounds like you're asking for something a little different.
Well, the way that I just framed it is the same thing, because these amendments would get us to exactly what I just talked about. It would have the 1-to-1 ratio. It would relax the retention banks and the variance requirements, but I wanted to make it clear that while these are proposed amendments, they're just our proposed amendments. As long as we get to what I just described, however we get there, whether they're exactly what's on the page here or something a little bit different, which is entirely possible. We're dealing with the entire state. I just wanted to make that clear, that it might not be what exactly is on the page.
Okay, I got you. All right, clear to me. Colleagues, any questions for Ms. Borden on
Just
this
a
item?
quick question. Deborah, you probably stated it, but who is the original sponsor of this bill?
That would be Delegate Love and Senator Elfreth. And they are Howard County and Montgomery County.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions for Ms. Borden, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt and accept the proposed amendments as articulated by staff for Senate Bill 526 and House Bill 723, and assuming inclusion, move to support both pieces of legislation.
Second?
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington,
Aye.
Vice Chair Bailey,
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Okay, thank you, Ms. Borden. So we are now going to go into executive session. This was time sensitive, so we have very, very recently added it to the agenda. Pursuant to the Maryland General Provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, Section 3-305B1, going into executive session, discuss a personnel matter regarding a specific employee. Folks from the public, I think this will probably take about 10-15 minutes. So we will be back with you, and commissioners and Ms. Borden, we will see you in the executive session. Thanks, everybody.
Can we have the linkage
Oh,
for
I'm
that?
sorry. I need a motion.
So move.
I apologize.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Giraldo, a second by Commissioner Washington. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Giraldo,
I vote aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. We will now go into executive session, and I will see us commissioners and Ms. Borden in just a bit. Thanks, everyone. Mr. Flanagan, are we ready to go? Are we recording again? Okay, we are back in open session. I would like to announce that direction was given to staff and advice was received from legal counsel and planning board related to a personnel matter. And we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Is there anyone here who wishes to oppose the staff's recommendations on items 4B, D, and E? Or are there any board members who wish to discuss any of these items? If
Approve
not, I look
items.
for a motion.
Agenda.
Second.
We've got a motion by Vice Chair Bailey, a second by Commissioner Washington. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Vice Chair Bailey,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Washington,
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. We will now move to our regular agenda items. And let me just read the following statement prior to starting the regular agenda, because we're going to have a slightly different procedure. At this time, I want to inform our audience of a new procedure we'll be employing for all quasi-judicial evidentiary hearings held by the planning board. Pursuant to the new zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations, those intending to provide testimony are required to take an oath. I understand that all persons signing up to speak and when submitting documents on our website already acknowledge the information they are providing is under oath. But I believe that administering an oral oath further ensures testimony is being provided with full knowledge of the requirement that to be truthful. And therefore, at this time, I would ask all persons online to please raise their right hand and repeat after me. Do you solemnly swear or affirm, under the penalties of perjury, that the responses given and statements made will be the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
I see Ms. France Steele. I think Ms. Camp, I do not think that, and Mr. Haller, I appreciate you doing what you're doing. I think our assumption is that attorneys will not have to take the oath. Is that correct, Ms. Coleman?
Yes, that's correct.
We're assuming your oath that brings you to being an attorney requires you to do this anyhow. So please have the minutes reflect the foregoing oath was administered by myself, the chair, for the following evidentiary hearings. Ms. Coleman, I want to make sure I'm listing which ones are correct as the evidentiary hearings. Are they all the agenda items that we have for the rest of the meeting? Not the extension request, but all the others?
Yes, Chair.
Mr. Warner?
That's correct.
Okay, so this would be for items 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, our agenda. Okay, great. And so we'll do this every meeting just to make sure that we're doing everything by the book. And now we will move on to our first agenda on our regular item on our regular agenda. This is item 5, specific design plan, SDP 8912-H9, Jenkinsheim, Covington, lot 76, block B. We have Mr. Shelley, who will give the staff presentation, and Mr. Morales, who will be speaking on behalf of the applicant, or Mr. Morales may be the applicant. And let me turn it to Mr. Shelley.
Hi, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. For the record, I am Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design Section. This is item number 5, SDP-8912-8H9 for Jenkinsheim, Covington Lot 76, Block B, requesting approval of a homeowner's minor amendment to construct a 12-foot by 29-foot screen porch with a landing and steps to grade at the rear of an existing single-family detached dwelling located within the 20-foot required rear yard setback. This application has been reviewed and evaluated in accordance with the prior zoning ordinance. Based on the findings presented in the technical staff report, staff recommends that the Planning Board approve this application with one condition, and this would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'll turn to the representative for the applicant, Mr. Morales. The floor is yours. Anything you want to add? Do we have Mr. Morales online? Hold on one second. Let me check the staff. Carlos.
The applicant.
Mr. Morales, if you were on the line, we don't hear you. If he's not here, this is a pretty straightforward case. I think staff has presented this well. So I'm not too worried about this if we don't have Mr. Morales show up. So is there anything else before us on this matter, Mr. Hunt, Ms. Coleman, Mr. Shelley?
Mr. Chairman, there are no additional pieces of information for this. I think we're good to go.
Okay, so commissioners, I would look for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve SDP-8912-H9 along with the condition as outlined in staff's report.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Next item on our agenda, item 6, is a conceptual site plan. It is CSP-21006 Hyattsville Bright Seat Road. Mr. Haller will be representing the applicant. Gupta will be giving the staff presentation. I believe we have a few folks signed up to speak. Let me turn it over to Ms. Gupta to give the staff presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm just checking my mic, whether you can hear me okay.
We can hear you and see you.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Mridula Gupta with the Urban Design Section. Item number 6 on the agenda is a conceptual site plan CSP-21006 titled Hyattsville Bright Seat Road. which proposes development of a gas station with a food or beverage store. As a matter of housekeeping, the additional backup includes one exhibit received from the applicant prior to the February 28th noon deadline. Next slide, please. The subject property is in Planning Area 72 and Council District 5. Next slide, please. More specifically, the 2-acre subject site outlined in red is located on the northeast side of the intersection of Bright Seat Road and Medical Center Drive. Next slide, please. The image to the left shows that the subject site outlined in red is located in the industrial employment or IE zone as highlighted in gray color. This conceptual site plan, however, is reviewed in accordance with the prior zoning ordinance, under which the site is within the planned industrial/employment park or I3 zone, as shown in image to the right in dark pink color. Next slide, please. This slide shows that the subject site, again outlined in red, is not located within any overlay zone under the prior or the current zoning ordinance. Next slide, please. The aerial map shows that the site outlined in red is vacant. Next slide. This slide shows that the site delineated in pink is generally flat and there are no environmental features. Next slide. This slide shows the master plan rights of way in the vicinity of the site. Next slide. This is the bird's eye view of the property, which is outlined in blue. The site is a 2-acre portion of a larger 5.3-acre property, which is currently developed with a 4-story hotel in the eastern portion of the site. Next slide. The proposed gas station will be 1-story, oriented towards Bright Seat Road, with 2 access points to a common private driveway that will share with the neighboring hotel. The gas dispensing stations and canopy are proposed to be located between Bright Seat Road and the building, with parking on all 4 sides. Conceptually, the service areas, which include the trash receptacle and loading space, are proposed to be located in the southeast corner of the parking lot, and it will be screened by landscaping. Next slide. This slide shows the conceptual landscaping proposed for the project in accordance with the applicable sections of the landscape manual. Next slide. This slide shows the property outlined in red. The woodland conservation requirement is proposed to be satisfied with off-site woodland conservation. Next slide. As mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the additional backup includes 1 applicant's exhibit, which proposes a revision to the recommended conditions. The applicant requests revision to condition 4.A.2 related to the minimum width of sidewalks. Staff is in agreement with this revision. In conclusion, staff recommends that the planning board adopt the findings and approve conceptual site plan CSP-21006 and type 1 tree conservation plan TCP1-003-2023, subject to the conditions found in the staff report as revised by applicant's exhibit 1. This concludes the staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Gupta. Commissioners, any questions for staff?
No questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Let me turn it to Mr. Haller. And then we have some folks signed up, or we have at least one person signed up, and we'll have the person speak after Mr. Haller. And Mr. Haller, you'll have a chance for any kind of rebuttal on that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Good morning. Thomas Haller. I'm an attorney with offices in Largo, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the applicant in CSP 21006. As staff noted, this property that's the subject of this CSP is a 2-acre portion of a larger 5.3-acre property and is proposed for the development of a 7-Eleven convenience store with gas. Just to provide the board a little bit of background, because this is a little bit unusual, I guess. At the time that the hotel was under the development review and approval process back in 2015, 2016, the applicant at that time was not sure exactly what the long-term goal of the project was going to be. There were 2 actual development proposals that were submitted when the property went through an adequate public facilities review. One was for a possible site with 2 hotels. The other was a possibility of a hotel with a gas convenience store. Subsequently, in 2015 and 2016, a detailed site plan was approved for the hotel that you see that has already been constructed, and as well as a second hotel that would go on the subject property. However, the market did not form for a second hotel, and the owner decided to go with the alternate development proposal for a gas station. In the I-3 zone, a gas station requires approval of a special exception. So beginning in 2021, a special exception was filed for this property, was processed through the planning staff, planning board, zoning hearing examiner, and the district council, and the special exception for the gas station was approved in July of 2022. But because the property is in the I-3 zone, which requires conceptual and detailed site plan approvals as well, we were not exempt from those requirements just because we had to go through the special exception process. So we now are beginning the first of 3 applications that will be in front of the planning board, this one being for the CSP, and then subsequently there will be a hearing on a new preliminary plan of subdivision, and then subsequently a detailed site plan. The images that you see for the gas station essentially reflect what's in the approved special exception. And so you have quite a bit more detail in front of you today than you would typically have with a conceptual site plan. But from a practical standpoint, just a couple of other notes. The CSP only includes 2 acres, the 2 acres that's the subject of this property, because the hotel use is exempt from the conceptual site plan. So there was never an original conceptual site plan approved with the site originally. And so as a result, because it's a different use than the hotel, a conceptual site plan was required. And so that's why the conceptual site plan is filed in this instance, and that's why it only applies to 2 acres. The second thing I would note is that, you know, in a conceptual site plan, typically what you're looking at is the conceptual design and access to the site. The access to this site was determined through the processing of the prior detailed site plan. And as you can see, there is a single driveway that accesses Bright Seat Road that serves the hotel and was designed to serve this pad as well. And so the site was designed and the special exception was approved, premised upon accessing the existing driveway which serves the hotel. No additional access is proposed from Bright Seat Road. No additional access is proposed from Medical Center Parkway. So from the standpoint of a conceptual site plan, this is a rather simple site. It's 2 acres, it's a single use, and the circulation and access patterns have already been determined. So as staff indicated, we did submit 1 minor revision to the proposed conditions, and that is condition 4A2 to reflect the sidewalk width for the special exception. With that 1 minor adjustment in the sidewalk width, we are in concurrence with the staff's recommendation as well as their conditions. I'm more than happy to address other questions that may be raised during any subsequent testimony. But at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have with regard to the application.
Thank you, Mr. Haller. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Haller?
I just have one, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
It's more a comment than a question. Mr. Haller, I hope that when they do the 7-Eleven, that they will have some charging stations for EVs.
This particular special exception, I believe, was not approved with any EV charging stations. I think this was processed before that was before legislation that would generally require that. But I don't know if Mr. Owen has any input. Mr. Owen represents the development entity and might be able to provide some input as to whether charging stations may be proposed.
Yeah, I just don't want us to be short-sighted with something like that, that's all. But I'd love to hear from Mr. Owen.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. In terms of the EV charging stations, they won't be immediately put in, but this site will be constructed as it's called EV ready, where all the electrical components, conduits, et cetera, will be provided. And at some point, 7-Eleven will take this site and run it through their EV group. And at that point, if they determine that EV charging stations are necessary here or warranted, then those will be put in. As the developer side, though, what we'll deliver is a site where they can be easily put in. You won't have to tear up any concrete, any paving, anything like that. All the conduits and everything, infrastructure-wise, will be put in place for EV charging stations of 4 or 5 locations, I believe.
Okay.
Then a determination will be made, and the stations will actually go in potentially at some point in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? No other questions. We can go to our sign-up sheet. I believe we only have one person signed up to speak. We have Yuri Borowski. Mr. Borowski, are you on the line?
Yes, sir, I am.
Or indeed, you've got your Blue Line Corridor background.
I did. I attended the hearing yesterday with Angie Rogers, who got me all pumped up about the beautiful county we're going to have. I don't see how a gas station fits into it, but I don't want to get ahead on my testimony.
All right, so if you could introduce yourself for the record, the floor is yours, and you have 3 minutes, and take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Yuri Borowski. I'm a resident of 5 years in Prince George's County, off Central Avenue and Bright Seed Road on Morgan Boulevard in that little intersection. I'm an avid cyclist. I admit I am much less of an avid cyclist since I moved to Prince George's County. I used to be more active when I lived in Ward 8 on Congress Heights, a much safer environment there than here. And my primary concerns are threefold. One is I'm not sure how this gas station fits into the economic vision that our leadership has for the county. There are already 4 or 5 or 6, 7 gas stations within 2-minute drive. I don't think anyone's going to be so desperate for gasoline to need gas station and not be able to make it 2 more minutes. But again, it's for Ms. Rogers to worry about that future. What I'm worried about is safety on the road. Bright Seed Road presently is the only safe road for cycling on that area, thanks to the school and the speeding camera there. I use Bright Seed Road a lot. I understand the applicant, as Mr. Haller said just now, more details than usual, quote unquote. And I did see there's a pedestrian and bicycle study done that's about 2 years and a change old. That was done in the middle of the pandemic on a day that had a 39-degree Fahrenheit temperature and 25 mile-per-hour wind gusts. I admit I'm an avid cyclist. I don't cycle. I don't even walk in those kind of conditions. I do have a car. I also drive a lot on Bright Seed Road, so I'm concerned for what's going to happen with the traffic there once we have a lot of people going into the Arena Drive, Medical Center Drive. And that also brings me to my final point, is the concern for the traffic, not only on the Bright Seed Road, and I'm going to touch more on that in the other hearing as well for the warehouse, but both of these developments are going to compound with the massive amount of traffic that's going to be dumped on the Medical Center Drive on and off the highway. That is not a Clover ramp there. It is going to be a dangerous intersection. Why is that intersection such a big deal? Because that presently is the only, and I want to repeat it again, the only way to cross the highway, the Beltway. Central Avenue is not bikeable, and I think it's 210 is also not bikeable. Presently, I can only cross the Beltway either by Metro or by Medical Arena Center Drive. Any amount of additional traffic from this side, from the warehouse, is going to make that crossing just as deadly as the other 3. It will not allow me to access the parks. I know I'm running out of time. I'm going to speak a little bit more about the park in the other hearing, but there's an important property acquisition that CPC recently did, but I'll talk about it more later. Again, I don't see how this fits the economic vision for the county. It's going to make Bright Seed Road dangerous, and it's going to make accessing the Arena Medical Center Drive extra dangerous. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. Appreciate you coming forward and expressing your concerns. And I believe that you've been in some conversation with staff, and I appreciate that you understand that some of these issues you'll be able to take up when there's the certificate of adequacy and at preliminary plan subdivision. I'm sure you will continue to have your voice heard on this. So much appreciate you coming forward.
Thank you, Chairman.
I don't see anyone else signed up to speak on this matter. Let me turn it back over to Mr. Haller for any final comments, any rebuttal you might want to take up, but mostly any final closing comments for you. Mr. Haller, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just as the board is aware, and you just referenced, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be pursuing approval of a subdivision. This is as I mentioned before, this is a 5.3 acre site. My client is purchasing the 2 acres that you see outlined in red on the screen, and so a subdivision is required. The property did go through an adequacy review back in 2016 when the hotels were constructed, and then we will be going through a review at this time, and as will be discussed at that point in time, the proposed development does generate fewer trips than were allocated to the site during the original review. So we're comfortable with the issues with regard to traffic adequacy. And then the other thing that Mr. Borowski talked about, cycling, there is a condition on this proposed approval, as well as the approval for the property to the north for providing bike lanes along Bright Seat Road, subject, of course, to approval of the operating agency. And those conditions are being applied in both CSPs and the applicant in this case, as well as, not to tip my hand, the applicant in the next case is do not object to those conditions. So we are respectful and understand the concerns of bike safety, and will provide the facilities as determined by the operating agencies.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant or anything? Any questions for Mr. Borowski? If not, then there's nothing further before us on this case. And what is your pleasure, Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve CSP-21006 and TCP1-003-2023, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and as further amended by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
We got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. This is a question for staff and commissioners. If there's no objection, we may want to go directly to item 9 on our agenda, since it's same attorney, and Mr. Borowski is also wanting to be speaking on this. So any objection if we go to item 9?
That's fine.
Okay. So we will take up item 9 on our agenda right now. This is a conceptual site plan, CSP 22003, Bright Seat Industrial. Again, Mr. Haller is the attorney for the applicant. Mr. Shelley will go to the staff report, and let me turn it over to Mr. Shelley.
Thank you, Chairman Shapiro. Are you able to hear me okay again?
We can hear you fine. Thanks for checking.
All right, great. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Andrew Shelley with the Urban Design section. The item before you is item number 9, conceptual site plan CSP-22003 for Bright Seat Industrial, which seeks to construct a distribution warehouse. Staff is recommending approval with revised conditions as shown in applicant exhibit 1, provided by the applicant and received by the hearing deadline on February 28th, 2023. And next slide, please. The site shown in red is located in Planning Area 72 in Council District 5. Next slide, please. The Bright Seat Industrial site shown in red is located east of the intersection of Jericho City Drive and Bright Seat Road. The site borders the Capitol Beltway to the east and has no direct access. Next slide, please. Subject property and its surroundings are zoned IE, or industrial employment, in the current zoning ordinance, and I3 planned industrial / employment park, and I1 light industrial in the prior zoning ordinance. This proposal will be evaluated under the I3 zoning in the prior zoning ordinance. Next slide, please. This map shows the adjacent master plan rights-of-way. The site has frontage on Bright Seat Road, a collector shown in green, and is adjacent to the Capitol Beltway Highway, which is a freeway shown in orange with no access point. Next slide, please. The aerial shows the existing vacant site with existing woodlands on the southern and eastern property boundaries. To the north of the site are existing warehouses, and to the south is an existing hotel and a proposed gas station with a food and beverage store. Next slide, please. This plan shows the existing vacant site. There's a WSSC easement in the north with a gravel access road and vegetation to the south identified in Stand A. Steep slopes, which are greater than 15%, are present, and those are identified in gray. Next slide, please. This plan demonstrates that the site will have an industrial land use, which is consistent with the underlying zoning, have 2 access points, retain the existing WSSC easement, and install sufficient landscape buffers in accordance with the landscape manual. 2 access points are proposed along Bright Seat Road, and these access points will be evaluated for adequacy at the time of preliminary plan of subdivision. 1 access point is proposed near the southern boundary, and the 2nd access point is proposed at the intersection of Bright Seat Road and Jericho City Drive. Both access points will have freestanding entrance signs, and conceptual freestanding sign architecture has been provided, and conformance with the prior zoning ordinance will be reviewed at the time of detailed site plan. Adequate landscape buffering will be provided, which includes the existing incompatible use to the south, the Capitol Beltway Highway to the east, and Bright Seat Road to the west. Conformance to the landscape manual and woodland conservation ordinance will be determined again at the time of a detailed site plan. Next slide, please. This colored conceptual site plan shows the overall proposed conceptual development. This conceptual site plan proposes an 152,000 square foot, approximately 44 foot high, single-story distribution warehouse on a 12.04 acre site. The proposed building will have the primary tenant entrances facing north, loading entrances facing south, and a Fox entrance facing Bright Seat Road, consisting with the surrounding area to model an office building. As discussed previously, these proposed access points to the site with freestanding entrance sign have freestanding entrance signs, which will be evaluated at the time of preliminary plan of subdivision and detailed site plan. The access point to the north proposes an entrance to a parking lot with standard vehicle spaces for employees and customers to access the primary tenant entrances. The access point to the south proposes an entrance to a parking lot with loading spaces and loading docks. The orientation of the building and the use of the 2 entrances ensures that the loading spaces do not face the Capitol Beltway and separates the traffic circulation. Conceptual architecture has been provided, and this will be evaluated at the time of detailed site plan. Stormwater for the site is proposed to be managed and treated in a series of 5 bioretention facilities, 2 submerged gravel wetlands, and underground storage pipes, which will be reviewed by DPI. Staff has conditioned that the applicant provide a marked bicycle lane along the property's frontage on Bright Seat Road and provide sidewalk connectivity on site as shown in the revised conditions in applicant Exhibit 1. Staff finds the proposed site layout is in conformance with the design with the applicable I3 zoning requirements and regulations, unless stated that the requirement will be demonstrated at preliminary plan of subdivision or detailed site plan. Findings related to the conceptual site plan are located on pages 5 through 10 of the staff report. Next slide, please. This TCP1 plan has been reviewed and deemed acceptable by staff, subject to the revised conditions indicated within applicant Exhibit 1. Conditions were revised to remove comments that would be addressed in a future TCP2. Remaining conditions address technical corrections. Next slide, please. In conclusion, the urban design section recommends the planning board adopt the findings of this report and approve conceptual site plan CSP-22003 and type 1 tree conservation plan TCP1-021-2022, subject to the conditions found within applicant Exhibit 1. This would conclude staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Commissioners, any questions for staff? If not, I'll turn back over to Mr. Haller. Mr. Haller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Once again, good morning. Thomas Haller on behalf of the applicant. It is somewhat ironic that here before you on 2 conceptual site plans on abutting properties. I think many of the members of the planning board are familiar with this stretch of Bright Seat Road between 202 and Central Avenue. This area has been designated for industrial development going back to 1977. And most of the properties along this stretch have been developed with industrial uses. The property to the north, as you can see, is improved with existing warehouses in the I-1 zone. The property to the south is, as you know, partially developed with the hotel and then will be further developed with the proposed gas station. And this property is now proposed as a kind of an infill industrial development. As the I-3 zone goes, it's a relatively small property, and as such is only proposed for 1 building. But as the conceptual layout shows, you know, as I said earlier, the issues with conceptual site plans relate to a large degree with regard to circulation and access. 2 access points are proposed for this building, 1 to accommodate employees and customers, which will be aligned across from Jericho Center Drive, and then the second one, which will provide access to the loading areas for the building, will be further south on Bright Seat Road. Other than that, there really aren't a whole lot of moving parts with this application. We have submitted a traffic study that will be reviewed as part of our preliminary plan of subdivision and the ADQ. And staff noted they are recommending bike lanes along Bright Seat Road, subject to approval of the operating agencies. We concur with those with that condition. And so we would be happy to entertain any questions that you have. I have with me today Mr. Cole Schnorp, who's with the applicant, as well as Paul Woodburn with our engineers Atwell, as well as our traffic consultant, Mr. Michael Enhart, to answer any questions that the board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Heller. Commissioners, any questions for the applicant, Mr. Heller, or any members of the team? The only thing I have is, and I'm maybe stealing Mr. Borowski's thunder, but for this area, I think I can speak for my colleagues as well. We're all pretty concerned about these issues around access for these properties and how it affects bike pedestrian safety. Note that this will be, assuming this is approved, that this will be an issue that we'll be taking very seriously at preliminary plan, at detailed site plan. Any other questions for staff or comments for staff, for applicant rather? If not, I'll go to our speakers list. The only person we have signed up to speak is Yuri Borowski. And if you could introduce yourself again for the record, and again, you have 3 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Yuri Borowski, again, resident of 5 years here, not too far from this site to be developed. I want to mention a couple of things. One is I just, out of curiosity, pulled up what is an I3 planned industrial employment park zoning is, and it says minimize detrimental effect on residential and other adjacent areas, mixture of industrial, research, and office use. I don't see the word distribution. Certainly, I'm not an attorney or a lawyer, but just kind of disappointing to see a site. I put the site right here on my map. It's right here, the red dot on the blue line corridor. That's where the site is going to be. So again, back to the economic development of the county. But it's not my job to watch out for the jobs in the county. My job is to make sure I don't get killed on those roads. And I reviewed, and I understand there's been a bit of preloading of information. I've reviewed Mr. Lenhart traffic analysis here. The amount of trips between 0.5 and 6 in Exhibit 9 and his report is going to practically double. We're going to go from 900 trips to almost 2,000 trips. Again, I'm not an expert in reading this, and I did try to get staff input on how to read this analysis. Unfortunately, we couldn't get to talk about this analysis because my understanding is it's too early to talk about it. Mr. Lenhart does propose some solutions here. I don't see how those solutions is going to not only improve the traffic congestion, because it's a left turn, not straight, that's a problem there, because I drive there as well. I don't just bicycle everywhere. And I know where the congestion is, and it's going to really ruin the traffic there. So that's going to be a detrimental impact. But Chairman, I want to talk about something a little bit different, but related to this. I want to commend your other hat that you wear as a parks chairperson. And I want to commend the acquisition of the property that you recently accomplished at Old Lake Arbor Golf Course. That is the only bicycle trail, recreational trail in the Central County. It's the only one that I can physically bicycle from my front door to, do the loop or 2 or 3 loops, and then come back without having to drive to, let's say, the MNCPPC property in College Park and such. And again, this here is the only access to that property, that little bridge across the highway. As I mentioned in the previous hearing, Central Avenue is not bikeable, and 202 is also not bikeable. So I'm very concerned about how the traffic is going to impact the area, especially the commercial 18-wheeler traffic. My understanding is that the traffic analysis does not separate vehicles from trucks, but in my personal experience and what I know of trucks, it's a lot likely that I will die under the wheels of an 18-wheeler if one runs me from behind, than if it is from a pedestrian, regular pedestrian passenger vehicle. So I'm really concerned for bringing this distribution usage to the zone and the commercial trucks. I also understand the analysis kind of says that vehicles are going to go north, south, this way, that way. Again, it seems that most of the vehicles are going to go right on that Medical Center, Arena Drive, right where I go bicycling, right, in order to try to access the only MNCPPC trail in the region. And in conclusion, I want to point out that also it highlights the need to build that Central Avenue connecting trail that we've been talking about for a decade, and that separate bridge. If that bridge is there, I don't really care what you guys build there. I don't care about the traffic because I have somewhere to go safely. I want to just conclude on that remark. Thank you, Chairman, for giving me the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Borowski. Well said about the Central Avenue Connector Trail. Couldn't agree more. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Borowski? Let me just say thank you again for coming forward and making your voice heard. And I know you're going to continue to pay attention to these issues, and we appreciate it. There's nothing else before us on this issue. Any questions, final questions for staff or the, I'm sorry, Mr. Haller, I'll give you the final word. Anything you want to add?
No, just wanted to note your comment. We understand the concern. We will make sure that that is addressed by both our traffic consultant and our engineering team at the time of detailed site plan and at the time of preliminary plan as well. So we would, again, we support staff's recommendation with the minor revisions in the applicant's proposed revisions to conditions.
Okay. All right, commissioners, if there's nothing else to bring up, there's nothing else before us on this case, what is your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff and approve CSP-22003, NTCP1-021-2022, along with the conditions as outlined in staff's report and is further amended by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion. I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye. Vice
Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Shelley. Thank you, Mr. Haller. I neglected to go through the order of business for today, so we're going to take up items 7 and 8, and then items 11, and we'll have item 10 last. So next will be 7, 8, 11, and then 10. I would like to take a quick break before we start items 7 and 8. So let's say it's 11:21. Let's come back at 11:30. See you all back then. Good morning, folks. We have Commissioner Washington somewhere. We have our senior counsel, who's not senior, unlike our principal counsel, who is senior.
Oh, my goodness.
I'm close enough.
I
to
heard
see.
that.
All right, we are all here and accounted for. We're, Kenny, we're ready? Recording? Okay. We are going to take up items 7, 8, and then item 11, and then we will wrap up with item 10. So what's before us is item 7. This is detailed site plan, DSP 86116-15, Waterside Subdivision, Hill Residence. This is a request for a continuance. We have Ms. Lockhart with the staff. We have, I don't think, do we have Mr. Taub? I don't think he's signed up to speak, so let me just turn to staff. Ms. Lockhart, take it away.
Good morning, Chairman Shapiro and members of the planning board. Doing a quick sound check. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Great, thank you. For the record, I am Dominique Lockhart with the zoning section. The application before you are items 7 and 8 on the agenda. Detailed site plan DSP 8611615 and conservation plan CP 22002 Waterside Subdivision Hill Residence. The applicant previously requested a continuance to the March 9th planning board date. Additional backup was received yesterday, March 1st, with an amended, with an amended continuance request to the March 23rd planning board date, noted as applicant exhibit 1. The continuance is to allow the applicant and staff additional time to work through environmental concerns and conditions. The applicant has also provided a 45-day waiver of the planning board action limit, which would now be April 11th, 2023. Staff recommends approval of this request for continuance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lockhart. I just want to make sure, because I was distracted by my notes in front of me. The motion for the continuance is to March 9th or to March 23?
March 23rd.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Coleman, can I take both these cases up together if I read them into the record, or do we need to have two separate motions? I can?
Yes, Chair.
Okay. Okay, so consider this a conversation about the DSP that I read, but also conservation plan CP 22002 Hill Residence Waterside. These are items 7 and 8 on an agenda. The request is for a continuance until March 23rd. You've heard staff's presentation on this. We don't have the applicant here. There's nobody signed up to speak. Any questions, commissioners, on these items? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the request for continuance to March 23rd for both these items.
Move to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it. 4-0. Next, we're going to go to item 11. This is an extension request for a preliminary plan 4-17014 Lesbies Lane. We have Mr. Diaz-Campbell and Mr. Tedesco representing the applicant. Again, this is a motion to approve a one-year extension. Mr. Diaz-Campbell, what do you have for us?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you fine, thanks.
All right, thank you. So, yes, for the record, I'm Eddie Diaz-Campbell with the subdivision section. Item number 11 on the agenda is an extension request for preliminary plan of subdivision 4-17014 Lesbies Lane. This preliminary plan of subdivision approved 29 lots and 6 parcels for development of 29 single-family detached dwelling units. The preliminary plan was approved by the planning board on February 4, 2021, and is valid through March 4, 2023. By letter dated January 6, 2023, the applicant requested a one-year extension of the plan's approval. This is the applicant's first extension request. If this request is approved, the preliminary plan of subdivision will be valid through March 4, 2024. Staff has provided a memorandum which evaluates the extension request for its conformance to the required criteria for approval of an extension, which are contained within the prior subdivision regulations, and staff recommends approval of the extension request. This concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Any questions for staff? Turn it to you, Mr. Tedesco. Anything you want to add?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the planning board. I'll be very brief. I want to thank Mr. Diaz-Campbell and Ms. Connor for their review of the request. I want to thank the board for its consideration of the one-year extension request. we would submit on our January 6th letter, which includes the findings necessary for the requested one-year extension, as well as staff's memorandum, which satisfactorily addresses those required findings for the extension. And with that, we would conclude and hopefully thank you for your approval of the extension.
Thank you, Mr. Tedesco. Commissioners, any questions for Mr. Tedesco or again for Mr. Diaz-Campbell? And if not, what is your pleasure?
Move to approve the one-year extension for preliminary plan 4-17014.
Second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Commissioner Giraldo. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing that, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
But aye.
I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Diaz-Campbell. Thank you, Mr. Tedesco.
Thank you.
Now, we have item 10. Thank you. We have item 10 on our agenda. This is a detailed site plan, DET 2022-2022-001 Westphalia Business Center 1 and 2. This was continued from January 19, 2023 Planning Board meeting. I'm going to turn to legal to give us a brief overview on the new zoning ordinance in regards to this plan. And then we'll turn to staff, Ms. Kozak, and then we have Marvin Jo Camp, who is representing the applicant. But let me start with our attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as a reminder, you may also want to check to make sure that anyone who might not have been present earlier in the presentation is sworn in.
Okay, well,
And
thank you.
moving on to that, this is our first detailed site plan under the new ordinance. So I just want to point out to the board in advance that there will be new, it's a new standard, it's a new zoning ordinance and applicable new laws. And so we'll be moving forward with this application under the new ordinance.
Thank you. Okay, good enough. Turn it to Ms. Kozak for the staff presentation. We do have folks who signed up to speak, so we'll hear from Ms. Kozak again, then we'll hear from the applicant, and then we will turn to folks from the community who want to speak. Ms. Kozak, take it away.
Yes, hi, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can hear you fine.
Okay. For the record, my name is Jill Kozak with the Urban Design Section, and the item before you is number 10, DET 2022-001 for Westphalia Business Center 1 and 2. This DET is for a total of 306,000 square feet of commercial/warehouse uses in 2 separate buildings on 2 proposed parcels. A variance for a reduction in the minimum floor area ratio requirement for the building on proposed parcel 32 is also requested. Originally, the application included a 3rd building on a separate parcel to the east of these lots, but in his submittal dated January 26, the applicant indicated they were removing that parcel and building entirely from this DET. After further review, staff has made the determination that the conceptual site plan conformance finding on pages 12 through 16 of the staff report should be deleted in their entirety. The current new zoning ordinance doesn't recognize a CSP as a mechanism or applicable plan for this property. Therefore, it's no longer applicable to the property as it proceeds to develop under the new ordinance. Additionally, the applicant has requested revisions to the findings and conditions, which staff is in agreement with. Next slide, please. The site is located in Planning Area 78 and Council District 6. Next slide, please. The subject plan is located at the west end of the overall Westphalia Town Center, north and south of future Presidential Parkway, east of Machinist Place, and north of Maryland 4. Next slide, please. The subject property and the rest of the Westphalia Town Center is zoned TACE, or Town Activity Center Edge. but was formerly in the MXT zone. The residential Parkside community to the northeast is zoned LCD, or Legacy Comprehensive Design Zone. It was formerly in the RM zone. Next slide, please. The subject property is within the military installation overlay zone for noise and height under both the current and the prior zoning ordinance. Next slide, please. The aerial shows the site is vacant and fully wooded and shows the adjacent Parkside community to the northeast. Next slide, please. The site has a varied slope with some regulated environmental features. Next slide, please. This map shows the adjacent master planned rights-of-way, which includes MD4, a freeway, and the Presidential Parkway, a major collector through the property. Next slide, please. This enlarged aerial shows the surrounding development. The development of Presidential Parkway through the site was approved with detailed site plan 12017 as amended, and I believe is permitted and in process. Next slide, please. The subject detailed site plan proposes to construct a total of 306,000 square feet of commercial warehouse uses in 2 separate buildings on 2 proposed parcels. Each building will be 1-story, rectangular, approximately 45 feet high, and potentially include multiple tenants. The buildings are generally positioned with a truck court and trailer parking spaces on the southern sides and passenger vehicle parking spaces on the northern sides. Next slide, please. Proposed parcel 32 lies north of Presidential Parkway with 2 vehicular entrances off of it and includes a 96,000 square foot building. A variance for a reduction in the minimum floor area ratio requirement from 0.25 to 0.15 for the building on this parcel is recommended for approval as discussed on pages 28 and 29 of the staff report. Proposed parcel 33 lies south of Presidential Parkway with 2 vehicular entrances off of it and east of Machinist Place with 1 vehicular entrance off of that road and includes a 210,000 square foot building. Next slide, please. The submitted landscape plan demonstrates conformance to the landscape manual as well as the new open space set-asides requirement as shown in this exhibit. Commercial or industrial uses in the TAC zone are required to provide 5% of the site area in open space set-asides, such as natural features and forecourts, which are used here and shown with hatching for this proposed site plan. Next slide, please. The submitted vehicular circulation exhibit shows truck circulation in pink or pink purple color and passenger vehicular circulation in blue around the 2 buildings from Machinist Place and Presidential Parkway. Next slide, please. The submitted bicycle and pedestrian circulation exhibit shows bicycle parking with orange stars, bicycle circulation in orange lines, pedestrian circulation with green lines, and then a planned shared use path along both sides of Presidential Parkway in purple. Some of these proposed improvements are the result of conformance with the new transit-oriented activity center base zones development standards and development standards in Part 6, which are discussed on pages 7 through 11 of the staff report. Staff would like to make one correction to the note to the table on page 8 of the staff report. The note should refer to section 276305A, not 3605A. Next slide, please. This image shows the associated type 2 tree conservation plan, which is also recommended for approval. It should be noted that due to the approved preliminary plan of subdivision and TCP1, the property is grandfathered into the Woodland Conservation and Tree Preservation Ordinance adopted in 1993. So no specimen tree removal variances are required. Next slide, please. This is a conceptual rendering of the building on parcel 32 as viewed from the north. Next slide, please. This image depicts the floor plan of the 96,000 square foot building on parcel 32, showing the multiple potential tenant doors on one side and loading docks on the other. Next slide, please. This image shows the exterior elevations of the building on parcel 32. The front elevation, shown at the top, features multiple storefront window and door system sections with metal awnings. The rear elevation, shown second from the top, features multiple loading dock overhead doors and service access doors, which is typical for an industrial building. Next slide, please. This image shows the building elevations for parcel 32 that will face the adjacent Parkside community, as well as exemplary images of some of the architectural features. The DET meets the multiple Part 6 development standards relative to setbacks, landscaping, and noise protections for the adjacent residential community, as discussed in the staff report and the applicant's SOJ. Next slide, please. This is conceptual rendering of the building on parcel 33 as viewed from the north. Next slide, please. This image again shows the floor plan for the building on parcel 33 with the tenant doors on one side and the loading docks on the other. Again, similar to the other building. Next slide, please. And this image shows the exterior elevations of the building on parcel 33, which again are consistent with those on parcel 32. Next slide, please. This image shows some of the proposed architectural details, such as textured panels, fins, and sunshades, and proposed signage, which includes one freestanding sign per building, one building-mounted sign per tenant space, and then a larger building-mounted sign indicating the North Point logo, which is the name of the logo for this industrial center. Next slide, please. This image shows examples of the proposed architectural materials, including metal and concrete panels in various shades of gray and white with some blue highlighting. Next slide, please. With that, the urban design section recommends the planning board adopt the findings of staff and approve detailed site plan DET 2022-001, including a variance to section 274204D3 and type 2 tree conservation plan TCP2 029-12-16 for Westphalia Business Center 1 and 2, subject to one condition with multiple subparts found on pages 34 through 35 of the staff report. Again, the applicant has submitted a revised finding and conditions in which staff is in agreement with. And additionally, as noted, the CSP conformance finding on pages 12 through 16 will be deleted in its entirety. And this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kosak. Colleagues, before we hear from the applicant, do you have any questions for staff?
I just have one. Ms. Kozak, if you could go through the justification for the variance again, please.
Yes, the variance in the TAC edge zone, there is now a minimum and a maximum floor area ratio required. The applicant is requesting for the building on parcel 32, which is the one to the north of Presidential Parkway. The applicant is requesting a reduction in the minimum floor area ratio from the minimum requirement of 0.25 to 0.15. They indicated the narrowness of the parcel and the regulated environmental features which can be seen on either side of that parcel to the north, and also the various development standards relative to adjacency to the residential community as restricting the developable area of the property. And I'm sure the applicant's attorney can speak more to that, but the discussion, I believe it was on pages, I had just said, the variance is discussed on pages 28 and 29 of the staff report, I think I had said.
Okay. All right, thank you. So in essence, what the developers trying to do is to protect more the residents from the massiveness of the building. Is that it?
Well, yes, because of the area that the regulated environmental features take up, the slopes on the property, the necessary setbacks from the residential community and landscaping requirements, trying to provide a larger building was not deemed feasible.
Okay, thank you.
Let me pick up on that as well.
Oh.
Go ahead, Vice Chair Bailey.
Ms. Kozak, you made a correction on page 8, the note, and I missed that. What was that correction, please?
Yes, there is a parking chart table on page 8. And underneath there is a note that refers to section table 273605A. It should be table 276305A. Just reversed the 3 and the 6 there.
Oh, that's all I need. Thank you.
So I'm building off Commissioner Giraldo's question in terms of the variance. So the idea is staff thinks it's better for the community to have a slightly larger but lower building rather than a narrower footprint but higher building. Is that the idea?
No, the building footprint would have to be larger to be able to meet the requirement. Or there would have to be a second story put into the building.
Right.
And that's I think we're in the same place. So what I'm hearing is it's better for the community to not have that extra floor. Okay, all right. So we'll hear from the applicant. I'm sure the applicant will talk about this as well. Commissioners, any other questions for staff before I turn to the applicant? None. Ms. Camp, the floor is yours if you want to introduce any members of your team as appropriate, but take it away. Marva, you're on mute. I don't think she's hearing us, huh?
She's still on mute.
Yeah,
she's still
she
mute.
did hear. Yeah. She's in 1
Ms. Camp.
second.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, but you're echoing. So there's another
Can you hear me?
computer that needs. Yes, now you're fine.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh.
We can hear you.
Just a second.
Okay.
Just one second. 1 second. 1 second.
Yep.
One
We
second.
can hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Can you hear us?
Muted.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Just
Can you hear us?
done it several times.
We can hear you.
Maybe she can't hear us.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
You cannot hear us. We can hear you.
We can hear you. Oh, thank goodness. We
No,
apologize. Technology.
But when we speak, we're hearing an echo.
Echo.
Okay, they're getting ready to do something. I hope it doesn't take me off again. Are you still hearing an echo?
We can
Yes,
hear you.
yes.
We hear an echo when we speak.
Oh. Okay. Well, just warn me
Hold on
when you're
one
going
second.
to. Okay.
Staff is making a suggestion. What is it? If you turn your volume down.
Okay. Well, I'm having the technology expert do it because I don't know what I'm doing. How about now?
Yep. We can hear you. And
Okay.
we're echoing, but we'll deal with it.
I apologize, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Okay, I'm gonna start over. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Planning Board. For the record, my name is Marva Jo Camp with law offices in Mitchellville, Maryland. I'm here on behalf of the applicant for the Westphalia Business Center. I'm joined in the office with our project manager and Dewberry, which is the engineer for the project. Let me first thank the staff for their outstanding work on this project. This, as you know, is the first DET. So as you can imagine, there has been a very significant learning curve, which has meant that both the staff and the applicant have had to really be very intentional in doing a deep dive in order to address the requirements of the new zoning ordinance. Having said that, I am very pleased to say that the applicant is in full agreement with the staff report as modified with respect to the transit finding, the required conditions as set forth by the staff report, with the deletion, as staff mentioned, of conditions 1A and 1C, as well as the comments with respect to the CSC as brought forth today by Ms. Jill Kozak. I did want to make one modification, and that is the change of the FAR should be from 0.25 to 0.19. I would also like to thank the community. This process has been going on for over a year and a half. During that time, we have met on numerous occasions with the community, both the older and newer areas, as groups and individually. As always, community members were engaged and made comments and shared their concerns and compliments, thankfully, regarding the project, which included issues around buffers, lighting, and architectural elements. I also want to recognize and thank the residents for signing up to speak and or submit information to the planning board. Dialogue between developers, residents, and staff is for me and has always been the essence of a collaborative and transparent process that produces great projects. I'm also excited because we are finally bringing commercial development to Westphalia that will add to the county's tax base and much needed employment opportunities for our residents. Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, we okay, I'm sorry, we are having something here. I don't know what happened. Mr. Chair, as mentioned,
we're hearing you fine.
okay, Mr. Chair, as mentioned, we are in full agreement with staff. However, I would request the opportunity at this point to specifically address some comments that were entered into the record regarding this application. My comments include, but will not be limited to, responses to comments that the applicant did not meet the required findings under section 273605E, conformance with the preliminary plan of subdivision, conformance with environmental requirements, validity of the proposed variance, and applicability of provisions that apply when the project was in the fringe, even though the project is now in the edge and not the fringe as suggested in submitted comments. I know that it sounds like a lot, but I promise you doing a quick response will not take very long if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
It is, of course.
Thank you. So I will begin with the comment that that this project does not satisfy section 273605E2. which requires the DET application comply with all conditions of approval in prior applicable development applications. Our main comment to this is that as reflected in the staff report, the applicant has met all conditions set forth for approval in the TAC zone. I was going to originally speak to CSP, which we did not believe applied, so I will go past that and move into other comments if you would allow.
Yes.
Okay, the TAC zone, the comment was that the proposed use conditions with the subject property designation as a commercial and transit area. The TAC zone establishes a list of uses. Applicant is developing the subject property in accordance with those uses. And I I know this is very different under the new DET. In some of the earlier zones, we've had use of tables. In this one, there are a list of uses that are allowed in the TAC zone that are both commercial and industrial. We have the opportunity, since this is I'm calling it a spec building, we have an opportunity to really be very aggressive in going after tenants. We have not secured one, but we know that we have the option both on the commercial side and on the industrial side. Also, the comments made that the transit area is located, we're not meeting the requirements of the transit area designation. I wanted to point out that the transit is located on parcel 6, which has been removed from this application and therefore not subject to the application. The next one talked about condition 17, which are the green building techniques, and requires a description of the use of green building techniques and alternate energy sources for the development throughout the site. Planning staff in their SCR comments clarified that the description must be more than just conformance. That was early in the process. We appreciated the comments that were made by staff. We addressed them in our final application, which sets forth the green building techniques, which showed that the applicant not only met the requirements of 4, but in fact, we met it by having 5.5. So we actually exceeded the requirements for this project as it related to green points. The next one talked about, and that can be found, members of the board, where we specify those green techniques on page 19 of the DET. The next has to do with the failure to have utility companies make comments in the report, in the staff report. The code requires, and we are consistent with, a 10-foot PUE adjacent to public streets. The application not only includes a 10-foot PUE to the north, it actually includes a 15-foot PUE to the south, per our coordination with PEPCO, as they needed an additional 5 feet for distribution of power. In addition, the application has coordinated, let me say that again, on a regular basis with each of the 4 utility companies, and has received a will serve letter from each: PEPCO, Washington Gas, Comcast, and Verizon. I would repeat, the same comment was made as it related to it, not the utility company comments not being in the staff report. And again, I won't belabor it by saying that we have had regular meetings. The next one had dedication for a transit stop. Condition 19 requires that the applicant dedicate the transit station to be labeled on the preliminary plan to public use. Couple of things I want to speak to. Again, the transit center is on parcel 6, which is not a part of the subject application. And as you would see in staff's report, there has been effort by the master development to address the issue of the transit station. The next several comments that were placed in the record deal with the same transit section. So at the, in order to keep saying the same thing, I apologize, but it talked about our original statement of justification, which said that we had spoken with WMATA, which we have, and with the operating agencies in Prince George's County. We continue to have those conversations, but it is no longer on the property that is before you today for consideration. Please bear with me because there were at least 11 comments, all having to do with the transit. The next one has to do with DET does not, 2022-001 does not satisfy section 273605E3, which requires that regulated environmental features be preserved or restored in a natural state to the fullest extent possible. The DET application does not preserve or restore regulated features to the fullest extent possible because the proposed impacts to PMA areas are not necessary. The PMA impacts that are shown were approved as part of the earlier preliminary plan and were adjusted as engineering necessity to address stormwater management and storm drain outfalls as discussed in the ELOJ. The next comment was DET has other deficiencies that it didn't conform with the approved stormwater management concept plan for the subject property. I would note that the site development concept plan specifically for this development was prepared and then approved by DPAP. The next is that the DE application does, DET, I apologize, application does not conform to the TACE zone block length standards, and the applicant has not requested a variance for those requirements. The block length and build to line standards in this case do not apply because the TACE zone is more than 1/2 mile beyond the core. The next one had to do with health department. The type of development proposed in this application requires a high level of impervious surface, which could have long-term impacts on the sustainability of the aquifer, a groundwater supply that serves the Upper Marlboro, Westphalia area, and for which this site is a part of the recharge. The stormwater concept plan to treat the impervious surface area has been reviewed and approved by DPI. This will be reviewed and approved in further detail at the time of final permitting. Next, which I think several of the board members asked about, the applicant's request for a variance to section 274204D3 does not satisfy the required findings under section 273616D. Staff report has determined that applicant has satisfied the required findings on this provision. It talks in specific that we have applied, applicant has applied under for the FAR for a variance. As I mentioned before, we asked for a variance from 0.25 to 0.19. And the comments were that the uniqueness when compared to other surrounding properties, the subject property is not physically unique or unusual. It is not exceptionally narrow or shallow. It does not have a unique shape, exceptional geographic conditions, nor does it have other extraordinary conditions peculiar to the property. Limits to the development area alone do not make the property unique without comparing the property to others in the surrounding areas. It further goes on to say the staff PowerPoint slide 3 shows that the property is not unique in narrowness, shallowness, or shape, and that point slide 7 shows that the property has no exceptional geographic conditions. I would note that that is not what is stated in the requirements. It talks about topographic conditions, and there is a laundry list of those things that must be shown to be able to get a variance, which the applicant has shown. The comments made further said that slide 15 shows that the other nearby properties have specimen trees on the property with similar distribution patterns. Specimen trees, Mr. Chair and members of the board, was not an issue for the subject variance. Next comment was that the screenshot from PG Atlas with green infrastructure plan and stream center layers on and screenshot from Westphalia shows that other nearby properties are similarly limited by PMA areas and other environmental features. We would note that this variance is based only on the subject property and not the nearby properties. Next, it talks about practical difficulties. The record lacks evidence to demonstrate that the applicant will suffer any practical difficulties if it was required to meet the minimum FAR required. Applicant could meet the minimum requires impacting features if it increased the number of stories in the development. Let me just say that as we have worked with this community, I was particularly disturbed to think that as we tried to make sure that we were respectful of the residential areas, that it would be suggested that we would have a project that would have 2 floors that close to a resident neighborhood. I would also say that we have scaled the buildings to those residential neighbors, have met with communities regarding compatibility, and one of the major issues was having large buildings. As you remember, there was a discussion about a 95-foot, I think, tall, and then a 7-story garage, which no one that we spoke with in the community wanted. A 2-story close to residential versus a minor modification to the FAR, we think is reasonable and is respectful of the community. The next comment was, regardless, potential impacts to environmental features are not relevant to determining whether a practical difficulty would arise. Applicant did not make an argument as to whether relevant to whether practical difficulties would arise. We made the argument that we meet the requirements for a variance. Next is that the record lacks evidence to explain why the requested variance is the minimum necessary. We believe that the record provides the support for the requested variance. The next is, and I'm almost to the end, members of the board, substantial impairment to the general plan and sector plans. The subject property is located in the fringe area of the Westphalia Town Center, staff report 29. The sector plan puts forth the following goals for fringe areas: develop town center fringe areas as distinct and cohesive districts of commercial, office, employment, and institutional uses in campus-like settings that are separate from the core and have greener character, and setting by abutting parkways, parks, and green space fronting Maryland 4, creating building styles that favor office or institutional developments with medium to large-scale commercial development, and limited landmark high-density structures such as mid-rise hotel and office buildings. Our response is that the subject property is not in the fringe, therefore greener character, etc., is not applicable. However, the proposed development is commercial and offers employment opportunity. It is also medium to large. The master developer has submitted a SDB for infrastructure to accommodate other uses such as a hotel and office building uses in other locations in Westphalia Town Center. And again, I want to make the point, this is just one piece of the larger Westphalia Town Center. As you know, there have been approvals of Westphalia East, which is a residential. This happens to be the first commercial, and we believe what we have offered is setting the bar for future commercial development. The next is that the development density intensity targets are 0.3 far or greater for commercial and employment uses. We agreed that they may be targets, but the zoning ordinance does allow for variance, and applicant has provided the necessary support for that variance request. The comments were also that the recommended range of land uses, and we were unable to find a site to support the comments as it related to the recommended ranges of land. Design principles: design large commercial buildings to have architectural variation that supports a human scale and provides the appearance and functionality of small scale developments, is what is written in the comments that were made. Our response is that the applicant has hired a well-regarded architect to ensure the highest architectural standards, including size, scale, materials, elevation. As a result, applicant has set the bar for all future commercial developments in the Westphalia Town Center. The next is that the fringe area along Pennsylvania Avenue should be designated as a destination for employment with corporate character, with service and retail uses located within the office and residential structures, and the potential for hotels in the area. The subject property is not in the fringe area. However, The proposed buildings are destinations for employment and service with a corporate character. You should also note that there are other areas in the Westphalia Town Center that will be cited for a hotel. The next is use and enjoyment of adjacent property. If the variance is approved, then the applicant is permitted to reduce the FAR to develop a distribution warehouse, which is not, we have not decided on who the tenant is. The variance will substantially impair the use and enjoyment of adjacent residential properties. The proposed development is not less intense use as asserted by the applicant, is only less dense. Distribution warehouses, again, that is not what we have said will be there, are high-intensity, heavy industrial use that operate on 24/7 basis and produce extensive amounts of light, air, noise, and pollution. They can also create hazardous traffic conditions due to the number of vehicle trips generated by the use. These uses are not appropriate near residential uses and will impair the use and enjoyment of surrounding uses. The application is for the approval to build in accordance with the use tables in the new zoning ordinance. While the distribution warehouse is on that list, there are other permitted uses. A small modification to the FER would absolutely not impair the enjoyment of adjacent residential properties. And in fact, applicant has been intentional with ensuring that the size, scale, and architecture respect and are compatible with the residential areas of Westphalia Town Center. In contrast, building a two-story building which hovers and is more intrusive will impair the enjoyment of the adjacent residential properties. I would also note that this project is well within the trip caps and even below the trip caps that have been established for the Westphalia Town Center. The next is any alleged practical difficulties is self-inflicted by the applicant because the applicant is choosing to develop property with a one-story building for a use that is not even permitted, which it is on the subject property. If the applicant developed the property with more floors, it would not need the variance. Applicant, in response, applicant has provided support for the environmental and physical constraints that support a finding that the practical difficulties are now not self-inflicted. The next is the applicant must apply for a tree conservation variance because the county's grandfathering clause violates the State Forest Conservation Act. The State Forest Conservation Act requires a variance to remove specimen trees in all circumstances. The applicant cannot meet the requirements for a variance to remove specimen trees under Section 25-199D. In response, applicant has an approved TCP1 and therefore does not need specimen tree variance as already approved for removal. The next comment was that the planning board cannot approve a TCP2 before it receives a copy of an approved erosion and sediment control plan. Condition requires the applicant, the condition set forth by staff does require the applicant to submit a copy of an approved sediment, erosion and sediment control plan prior to certification, which we will do. Next, the applicant has not exhausted all on-site preservation techniques as is required under Section 25-122C and the Environmental Technical Manual. In response, application has been prepared based on the previously approved TCP1 for the overall Westphalia Town Center development and the Prince George's County Woodland Conservation Manual. Applicant agrees with the findings of the staff review of the TCP2 plan submitted. Also, and the applicant agrees with the findings of staff as it reviewed the TCP2. And with that, Mr. Chair and members of the board, I know that was a mouthful, but I thought it important that we respond specifically to the comments. I want to say again in closing that this project has been going on for over a year and a half. We have spent considerable time with the staff. We have spent an inordinate amount of time, and we did so gladly with the community. I have had Zooms, I've had in-person, I've had group, I've had individual to make sure that we were submitting a project that could be a standard bearer for the Westphalia Town Center. And we are so pleased and so proud that we are the first commercial development to go into the Westphalia Town Center. And with that, we would ask for the planning board's consideration of approval of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could turn your microphone off, thank you. Commissioners, any questions before we turn to folks who are in opposition? Any questions for Ms. Camp?
I have one clarifying question, Mr. Chairman. And let me thank you, Ms. Camp, for the very comprehensive response to those issues and items raised by the public. I think that you're getting in front of that will serve the discussion well. My clarifying question is with regards to the FAR. I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly, that you're proposing to or did reduce the floor area ratio for parcel 33 from 0.25 to 0.19. Did I hear that correctly? I just want to, your references to the FAR, the modification you referenced.
Yes, ma'am. It is from 0.25 to 0.19. You are correct.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, so let us turn to folks who've signed up to speak. I've got, let me go through the list and see who's here. And I also want to swear folks in again, just to make sure that we're doing it by the book. So I have a Ms. White, Arma White. I have a Denise France Steele, Destiny Harris, Chantel Fuqua, Shinoni Whitley, Corinne Carter, Brianna Bostic, Teresa Scott, and Alexander Votaw. Folks, if you could come on and just acknowledge, just so I know who's here.
I'm here. Destiny
Okay.
Harris.
France Steele is here.
I'm here. Brianna Bostic's here.
Great,
Hi, Arma White's here.
great, thank you. Did I hear Angel Ross? And Ms. Scott? Ms. Votaw? Ms. Votaw, are you there? All right, I don't hear Ms. Votaw. She is a attorney who was, I imagine, representing some folks, but I don't know who, and she is not here. So maybe it's a technology issue. I don't know. Let me check with staff. Do we see her online? Okay. All right. So then let me just go through the list. Each of you. I'm sorry, Mr. Is it Roque or Roque, Carlos?
I got a question. So I was kind of I connected. It was like 10:20. I'm representing Mr. Eric, and we're building a screen porch. But I don't know if you guys already passed my case or not.
Oh, you know what? We did. I'm fine to have you step in this way. So we heard your case. That case was approved earlier this morning. You are good to go. You can go on about your way.
Thank you so much. All right.
All right. Sorry, folks. So let me just go through the list as I have the list, and I will give each person up to 3 minutes to speak. And we'll see if Ms. Votaw, if we find her at some point. But in any case, let me start with my list. I have Angel Ross. Is Angel Ross on the line? Next, I have Ms. White, Arma White. I heard Ms. White before. I think she has on the phone. Is that right, Ms. White?
I am here. Is this
Okay.
the time to, is that what you're saying?
This
or
is
you
the
just
time to
about-
speak. The floor is yours. You have up to 3 minutes to speak. We'll keep a clock going just to manage the time. And if you could introduce yourself, state your name and address to the record, and the floor is yours. You have up to 3 minutes to speak.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Arma White. I'm a homeowner in Parkside, Westphalia, 3501 General Breeze Drive. And I first just want to thank you all for the opportunity just to speak and provide this testimony today. So I have major concern about the application at the reference site. Prior to purchasing my home, I was informed that this zoning area would be like residential, hotel, retail, and office. And that, once construction would begin, that it would be a different site than what we're looking at now. So I know we have this proposed application for the warehouse, and it doesn't appear that it conforms with the prior use. It also looks like it conflicts with the master plan for Westphalia. So I'm not in favor of the proposed industrial warehouse. I feel like it will have a direct impact on the quality of life due to the traffic As we know, warehouses brings a different traffic to an area. Again, this site sits in the middle of two neighborhoods, the Westphalia Parkside, the Westphalia Town Center. And to me, it just doesn't seem logical to have a town center in the middle of the community. And just with the traffic impact that it will bring, just amounts of trucks, the truck routes, the types of trucks, we're unaware. Again, this the lady that spoke earlier, we don't even know who will be the resident of this facility. They're still searching. So we just don't, there's a lot of unknowns that we don't know what may go in there. What type of trucks, the number of trucks, like I said before, the routes, or how many within a 24-hour period. Also, there's just concerns about just the air pollution, just the potential for increased air pollution in this area with additional traffic, more specifically like the trucks that I spoke about earlier, that would just have a direct impact, as well as the removal of the trees is very concerning. As we know, trees act as a barrier, as a filter, and just the removal of that, we wouldn't have that barrier just to kind of assist with air pollution, as well as the concerns with noise. Just in this area with Westphalia, we know Route 4 is a very busy road within PG County. I think it's considered one of the busiest roads. And then we kind of couple that in with just the noise of bringing in this facility in the midst of our community. We just have major concerns with that noise. A lot of us just bought in this community because it's not directly, in that DC area where it's completely compacted and extremely busy. We wanted the comfort of just kind of being away from everything and like an acquired community that helps with the anxiety and the stress and everything that we're going on in this new climate now. And then when we keep bringing this type of development to a community, it just basically collides with that. And again, I'll be clear, it's not that we're opposed to just construction in our areas, but it's the type of construction, like this industrial site is just definitely was something that we do not want and is not welcome in our community. And I just asked the board to closely examine this application and consider the concerns of the homeowners and the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White, for your thoughtful remarks. Appreciate you taking the time to speak. Next, we have Denise France Steele. Ms. France Steele, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, sir.
Okay, if you could introduce yourself for the record. And again, we have a timer going, so you have up to 3 minutes to speak, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, sir. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Denise France Steele. I live at 4705 Imperial Oaks Lane, which is in the Parkside portion of the adjacent area. One of the issues that I have is not only am I a resident
Ms.
that
France
opposes
Steele, I'm going to interrupt you. Ms. France Steele, let me interrupt you for a second. I just realized, I believe I neglected to, did I do the oath again?
No.
Okay, so I forgot to, so we'll take this as a, let me just catch it. You did it the first time, okay. And hold on, Ms. White, did you do it the first time?
Yeah, I was on the first time when it was done, I think like closer to the 10 o'clock hour. So that's
Perfect. Okay. So just in case anybody who's on the line expecting to speak, let me do it again, just for to make sure that we are covering all the bases. So if you've already done it, you don't have to do it again. But do you solemnly swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the responses given and statements made will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I'm going to take everyone as being sworn in. And again, let the minutes reflect that the oath was administered by the chair for the evidentiary hearing. And I apologize for the interruption, Ms. France Steele, and you can continue. And we'll even reset the clock for you. I apologize.
No problem. I understand. So I live in on Imperial Oaks in Parkside. One of my biggest, I have several concerns. One is that when the applicant is speaking and she's saying she took our meeting with us previously, she took those things into consideration and is acceptable to us. I personally find that offensive because not everybody in Parkside, especially those that would be considered applicants or residents with standing or a person of standing, this structure would be built less than 1,000 feet from my property. One thing I would like the members to take into consideration when they're voting is the majority of the people that will be in this line of sight and visible, This does not conform with the conceptual site plan nor the master plan that was originally provided to us. And most of us paid some sort of lot premium because we would have an unobstructed woodline view. And now that is not going to be the case. Thus, our property values are going to be affected. Also, as it relates to when she made a response to the CSP, this is not retail, nor is it office space. This is actually classified as an industrial building, which does not meet the standard nor the requirement. The FAR variance that is requested, I would respectfully ask that you deny that. She openly stated that it requires you to build a larger building with a bigger footprint, although it is not as high. In all honesty, it doesn't matter because an industrial building is not what we as the community wanted. And I know it's definitely not what I thought I would be getting when I was looking at the master site plan and chose my lot specifically. I knew what I was looking for and I knew what my dollars were going to be providing. This also puts in a situation in which if that building is constructed, individuals will have the ability to walk from that warehouse directly through the back of these homes in the communities if they do not have a fence line. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is that she is saying that it's on the edge and not in the fringe zone. However, if you look at the conceptual site plan where these buildings are supposed to be built, it does say fringe unless there is an updated site plan that has not been provided. And for me, it's not what I thought I was buying into. You have people that have spent their life savings up to $250,000 for these homes, and you're telling us that we're going to be relegated to looking at an industrial building, and there is nothing for us as community members. And also the last thing I wanted to say is she stated that there is an application that had been submitted for infrastructure on retail space. That application has not yet been submitted.
Okay. Ms. Fransfield, thank you very much. I'm sure the applicant, we may have some questions about some of the things you're bringing up. I'm sure the applicant in their rebuttal will respond to some of this as well. So thank you for taking the time. Next, we have Destiny Harris. Ms. Harris, I see you. And if you could introduce yourself, name and address for the record, and the floor is yours. You'll have up to 3 minutes. Take it away.
Good day, everyone. My name is Destiny Harris. I live at 9103 Gardeno Lane in Parkside by Westphalia. Couple things, and I'm trying to be as quick, but the first thing that I recognized back in January on the 12th when I listened in on the initial planning board meeting that this was supposed to come up with was a topic of discussion was the responsibilities of the Prince George's County Planning Board. And that is to serve as citizen representatives for their communities. That is us. And helping to plan, shape, and maintain livable neighborhoods and healthy lifestyles for residents and the families of Prince George's County. That is the responsibility of this planning board. We are the citizens, not the applicant. And so it really disturbs me, even as the attorney that just came on, when she talked about being disturbed. I want you all to think about how do we as the citizens, the people who live here, feel when our concerns have been relegated, as she said, to lighting, buffering, and some architectural features. That was never our main concerns. This is not a new situation. This was fought back in 2019. It was dropped because of some, things that they didn't do right. So now I feel like the applicant, the attorney, they're trying to cross every T, dot every I, because they know where this community stands as far as having these warehouses built in our neighborhood. That she said that they work with the community. I don't know how many people are signed up to speak today. It's the middle of the day. People have to work. But I know that literally about 2 weeks ago, there was a meeting about this, and there were over 50 people represented on the line in opposition to this. And so I am, as she said, very disturbed that they are literally boxing us into warehouses. This is not the only warehouse in our community. On September 29th of last year, Vista 95 Logistics Center was approved. They're supposed to begin construction this spring. This is going to be on the north side of Westphalia Road. It is a 48.3 acre complex of warehouse, another warehouse building, which will have trucks there. We also have the Capital Electric headquarters that is really literally right on the other side on Westphalia Road. Again, another warehouse. So traffic right now is already bad coming on and off of Pennsylvania Avenue. It is only going to get worse. And I just implore this planning board to, again, think of the citizens. Would you want to be boxed in by all of these trucks? Would you want to contend with this type of traffic every single day when you were trying to enter and leave your neighborhood? This is not about a 2-story versus a 1-story building. The citizens of this neighborhood do not want this here, and we're going to fight it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Much appreciated. Next, we have Chantel Fuqua. If I pronounced that correctly? I see you in front of us. There we go. Go ahead. Ms. Fuqua? You can go ahead and speak. Your microphone is, you're unmuted, so if you speak, we'll hear you. Try again. All right, almost. Try again. We can hear you, but we don't. But it's very muted. Ms. Fuqua, let me ask you to call in. It looks like you're coming in on a computer. Is that what we're seeing? It might be better for you to call in with the number that you see. Did she get a number? So if you call in with that number, I'm going to move on to the next speaker, but we're not going to forget you. We'll come back to you, and please try to call in, okay? Next, we have Shanone Whitley. Ms. Whitley. I saw her on before, but I think she dropped off. Next, we have Corinne Carter. Ms. Carter, are you on the line? Next, we have Ms. Bostic, Brianna Bostic. Ms.
Hi,
Bostic,
everyone.
are you on the line?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly, yes. If you could identify your name and address for the record, and you have up to 3 minutes, and the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Bostic, and I've lived at 4207 Woodspring Lane. I'd like to state my agreement with the items outlined in the additional backup files on pages 1016 through 1021 and pages 1009 and 1010. The application does not comply with CSP 07004001 conditions 1 and 17. The applicant does not propose any dedication for transit station in the parcel in the application, and it does not satisfy Section 273605E3, which requires that regulated environmental features be preserved or restored in a natural state to the fullest extent possible. The applicant's request for a variance to Section 274204D3 does not satisfy the required findings under Section 273616D and is a substantial impairment to the general and sector plans. The State Forest Conservation Act requires a variance to remove specimen trees in all circumstances. The applicant cannot meet the requirements for a variance to remove specimen trees. Other concerns that remain unaddressed include extensive light, air, noise, water pollution, and hazardous traffic conditions. You have not stated who will occupy this space, which is even more concerning because residents will not know what's coming. This strategy feels deceptive. There is no sediment control plan for a site adjacent to homes, which is a short-sighted health hazard. The statement provided on page 1008 of the additional backup files is a statement from the Prince George's Department of Health. There is a mention of a desktop health impact assessment review of the detailed site plan, and this is insufficient evidence of estimation about the problem of dust and air pollution that will come about during the construction of and during the function of the proposed industrial use for the business center. There's no information about particulate matter in the air and soil, and increased diesel fuel exhaust will affect the health of residents. A desktop assessment will not matter if the neighborhood becomes a cancer cluster or if young children and adults in the adjacent neighborhood, which is very adjacent, experience increased respiratory illness. My broader concern is that there is no reliable and trustworthy HOA representation for the residents of this community. Residents across the county are not aware of how the recent rezonings put them at risk for similar developments, and the lack of meaningful health assessment, notification to residents, community engagement until it's time to approve final plans, and the nature of the relationships between developers, lobbyists, and elected officials is a demonstration of lack of integrity that needs to change in order for the county to see itself actualized for what it really is, a beautiful place where families gather and grow, and where people from all over the world come, arrive looking to connect, grow their education, and participate. And I'm grateful for the participation and building the communities they want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bostic. Appreciate you taking the time. I believe we have Ms. Fuqua on the line. Hold on one sec. We have staff working to make sure that her voice can be heard. In addition to that, did I leave anybody out? Is there anybody else who has signed up to speak, who's registered to speak, who I have not called on? Come on the line or make your voice heard just to make sure.
Good afternoon. This is Chantal Fuqua. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can actually. We can hear you quite well.
Oh.
If you could introduce yourself. I'm glad you were patient with us. If you could state your name and address to the record, you'll have up to 3 minutes to speak, and take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The technology has been a challenge this morning and afternoon. My name is Chantal Fuqua. My address is 6007 Fellowville Court. That's in Upper Marlboro. I'm calling because I am a member of the HOA in an adjacent neighborhood. Basically, we're like right across Pennsylvania in Northern Park. I do believe that the residents of Westphalia, just in general, and Parkside, they are at a significant disadvantage in terms of their opposition for this project because they don't have control of the HOA. And the builder basically, and this applicant, they keep building homes basically so the residents don't have a voice in this particular situation. But we have several concerns as adjacent homeowners. We're very concerned about the health and safety of residents just in general. We're concerned about the pollution. As other homeowners have also stated, we're concerned about chemicals, environmental, about people developing cancer because of fumes that will come from this warehouse and other commercial endeavors. We're concerned about safety. That's already an issue. The traffic and congestion around the 4, and especially in the morning where people are trying to go to work, it's significant, basically. You can leave right here at the 4 in Westphalia, like Woodyard Road, and be stuck, basically, in between there and Suitland Parkway. If you're trying to go to D.C., it can take you almost 15 minutes, basically, to cover that flank. There are already 18-wheelers that are coming through here, and we don't even know what would happen, basically. The increase in congestion could be 25-fold, basically, in terms of, just being able to travel through this stretch. We're also concerned about being flanked by commercial development, the Cardozo project, basically. So that'll be on the side where our neighborhood is. That is a continuing issue, basically. That would start to make our area, basically, which we hope when we purchase here, basically, that it will be a peaceful residential area. It will start to become unsafe and also more like in urban development, more like we're in DC. And I believe that residents bought out here in Port George's County because they were looking for a certain particular type of neighborhood and living experience. And then lastly, I think I'll end on property values. As my other concerned homeowners have said, people have put a lot of money into their property. I put down a significant amount of my own money on my property, and all of my fellow, let's say, homeowners have in this area, basically. And we're concerned about losing that. And we're really asking basically the council, you know, to value us as Prince George's residents, basically to value us as contributing to the tax base, and to really vote in opposition of this project. So thank you for allowing me to have some comments this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Fuqua. Really appreciate you working through this technology, and good to hear your voice on this issue. All right, is there anyone else from the public who has signed up to speak who have not gotten to yet? I just want to make sure because we've had some technology issues. So jump on, let us hear your voice or see your face just to make sure. Okay, all right, then I will turn it back to the applicant for any, well, actually first, commissioners, are there any questions for any of the folks who've spoken before we hear from the applicant? Okay.
I don't have any.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
My good. No questions other than to thank the citizens for obviously attending and expressing their very clear passion with regards to this case and this project. But I think it's appropriate to note, and I cannot recall, with my apologies, the individual who stated it, but spoke about, you know, the planning board's responsibility to the citizens and the public. And we absolutely do. But and I would also like to say that each of us as planning board members are also citizens and the public and proud Prince Georgians. And we love this county greatly and deeply, and certainly as a neighbor and as a citizen can appreciate how sometimes project may not align with what one's vision or what they had envisioned with regards to their community and its neighborhood. And I would venture to say that I know myself and even my colleagues have likely all been impacted by this. But our first and foremost, I think it's, again, important to say that our responsibility is to make sure that we're following the law. And in so doing, you're oftentimes going to find a lot of varied opinions about that. And I just thought it worth saying that, Mr. Chairman. So thank you. That's it.
I appreciate the words, and I would associate myself with the remarks of Commissioner Washington. And the thing that I would add to this is, and Ms. Camp, when you go with your rebuttal and close, you may want to take some of this up. So to Commissioner Washington's point, that we're very concerned about making sure that we're minimizing negative impact on folks in the community, and we want to grow the way in what we consider to be a healthy way. And the applicant has rights too. And so the zoning of this property allows these kinds of uses. And one thing that we want to be mindful of is, again, to make sure that we're staying in our lane, is to make sure that that when we take up issues like this, we are not getting in the way of what the developer has a right to develop, but again, taking into account minimizing the negative impacts. And so there's some things I heard, Ms. Camp, that raised some concerns for me. One of them was, if it is the case that the developer said to these homeowners that they would have an unobstructed wood view, that has nothing to do with you, Ms. Camp, your client, because you have the right to develop this property. But it does concern me that it's possible that that these homeowners were lied to by by the developer of those homes. And again, I wasn't involved in that at all, but yeah, I mean, it's zoned MXT next to it, or it was. So I don't know why these homeowners would be told that this would be woodland next to them. Now, the flip side of that, though, is I am concerned about the buffering, and I'm concerned about what the homeowners can and can't see. So my quick look on this is that the buffering is not that robust. And so I'm quite curious to hear from you all, Ms. Camp and other members of the applicant's team, exactly what you are planning in terms of the screening. And similarly, there was a question that somebody brought up about the fence line, saying that there was no fence being plan, which doesn't make sense to me, but if that's the case, so is there sort of free walking access from the, Ms. Camp, I can't hear anything you're saying if you're speaking to us. I see that you're wanting to contribute, but hold the thought because we can't hear you anyhow. So I have questions about the fence. I have questions about the view shed and the screening. Those are the big things. Other issues around the noxiousness of the use. There are all sorts of ways in which that issue is regulated, but it is an allowed use for the site. So that's not something that we're going to get too in the weeds about, even though there are environmental standards that have to be met. So with that, but before I turn to you, Ms. Camp, I did see that Ms. Whitley has come on the line. And so I want to give her the chance to speak as well. So Ms. Whitley, as I said with the other folks, if you could introduce yourself, state your name and address to the record, I'll give you up to 3 minutes to speak, and the floor is yours. You froze, Ms. Whitley.
Greetings, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Ms. Whitley, you're very choppy. Hold on one sec. Let it buffer for a second. Hold on.
I might
You know what, Ms. Whitley, let me make a suggestion. Turn off your camera.
and I'll also turn my camera.
Turn off your camera and maybe we'll be able to hear you better. Try again.
Okay, and I can still and if you want me to dial in, that might also help.
We can hear you now, so you can go ahead and speak. But Ms. Whitley, before you go, I just want to make sure you were sworn in. Ms. Whitley, were you sworn in when I asked everyone to take the oath? Are you online? Yes.
Yes, I was watching
Okay,
when the oath was.
Okay.
Yes.
And so you took the oath. You're sworn in, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then the floor is yours. You have up to 3 minutes to speak and take it away.
Okay. I think there may be a bit of a delay, so I will try to be concise. Applicants and my fellow neighbors. My name is Chinonye Nakwe Whitley, PhD. I am a resident of the Parkside at Westphalia community in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and I live at 902 Oaks Court, which is directly impacted by the location of the proposed buildings in the DET 2022-001. My home is direct application. My directly behind the townhouses that would the building, so I can see the townhouses from the back of my house. And I'm very strongly opposed to this application for a number of reasons. First, I'm opposed because of the potential air pollution that can be caused by the additional traffic that would be parking, idling, and coming in and out of the facilities that are being proposed. I have 2 children. One is 11-year-old girl, the other is a 4-year-old boy. And I'm very concerned about potential environmental impacts to their health in terms of asthma and other issues that can come about. 2, I'm very concerned about my ability to enjoy the property that I have purchased. I am a 2-time purchaser of this community. I once owned a townhouse in the community. And then when I also opposed the original plan to come here in 2019 was no longer, it was withdrawn. I felt safe enough to buy a single family home in the community because I didn't have to worry about industrial warehouse being placed near my residential community. I'm also concerned that the 14-foot wall that has been proposed will not sustain or reduce the noise that can come from the building. We already live near Joint Base Andrews and we hear large booms. We had to acknowledge and accept that when we bought our home. But we did not have to accept additional noise that could come from this potential development. I do that the developer be more clear on the
Ms. Whitley, we lost you again. Dr. Whitley, I'm sorry, we lost you again. Dr. Whitley, you there? Unfortunately, technology is not cooperating. I don't know if we have any comments from her in writing, do we? Did she contribute? Okay. All right, if she works her way back online, even if the applicant is still in rebuttal or close, I'll give her the opportunity to finish her remarks if that's okay, colleagues. Okay, so Dr. Whitley, if you hear this, if you fight your way back on, we'll give you a chance to conclude your remarks for sure. And with that, I'll turn it back to the applicant. Ms. Camp, are you with us?
Hear me, Mr. Chair?
We actually can hear you well. Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay. Every technology sounds fine with you, so the floor is yours for rebuttal and close.
Okay, and I hope you'll bear with me because I was trying to take notes, so I'm going to have to look as I go forward. Let me start by saying again.
Let me just say, Ms. Camp, you heard my comments, and we have Ms. Whitley. I'm going to try to get her back on. But you heard, hold on, Ms. Whitley. You heard my comments about the screening and the fence line, the buffering, and all that. So I definitely want you to address
I'm
that.
just trying to.
But before you go, Ms. Whitley, we can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not sure where I left off. What the last remarks were that you were able to hear.
You were talking about your 11-year-old daughter and your 4-year-old son.
Oh dear. Okay, so most of them. Thank you for the opportunity for me to restate what I was saying. I wanted to say very quickly that first, I am very concerned about the air pollution. Second, I'm very concerned about the additional traffic that is already difficult for the area, as well as the juxtaposition of an additional industrial area space around this community. I wanted to state that, and you heard this already, I previously owned a townhouse in the community, and when I learned that there would not be a warehouse built in 2019, it gave me comfort to be able to buy a single family home in the community, which is actually closer to the location of the proposed facilities. I also wanted to state that I really want to demonstrate that there will be reduced enjoyment of the area due to the traffic, due to our reduced ability to travel around the area with additional trucks. I don't feel comfortable with my children being able to bike around the area with all of the additional traffic that will be added to the area. And so with that, I will pause for my comments, but I do hope that you consider that other types of establishments such as retail and mixed-use housing could be placed in that place rather than a large industrial warehouse, which doesn't serve any of the residential needs of the community that is directly adjacent to the proposed building. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Whitley, and I'm glad we were able to hear your remarks, and I'm glad you figured out the technology. Okay, Commissioners, any questions for Dr. Whitley before we turn it back to the applicant? No? Okay,
No
all right,
questions.
thank you very much. Thank you. Ms. Camp, back to you.
Okay, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can hear
Yes.
you and we can see you, and we hear
Okay.
no echoes. All clear.
Oh, great. So again, please bear with me as I try to look down and up to address the comments that were made. Let me first say I want to thank the citizens and residents of the area because I think it's exceedingly important that they are involved in this process and appreciate the comments that were made today. So I'm going to start with the comment dealing with the buffer, the tree removal. When we met with the residents there, one of the things that we were committed to was making sure that we had a adequate buffer between the residential and between the residential area and the commercial area. And what we did was two things. Well, no, actually more than two things. One is we preserved woodland conservation, so we maintained trees that were mature trees on the property. In addition to that, we are planting trees to add to the buffer to make sure that one, the trees are tall and the trees are wide. So we have been very, very specific about how we have handled trees. We are not removing trees. What we are doing is adding trees. I will also note that we have there, in response to the comments about noise and movement, we have a retaining wall, we have a noise wall, and we have a stormwater management facility that will address some of the transient movement that might have gone along between the commercial and the residential. I'm not sure if I said it, but we have a retaining wall, a noise wall, and fencing. We also have existing trees, and we have new trees that we showed and discussed with the community to make sure that we were respectful of the need between the commercial and the residential. The other thing that I want to speak to is obstructed view. I cannot speak to what another builder or developer said to that community, but let me assure you, we never made any representations about the, no representations with respect to obstruction. In fact, I would point out that in the original plan, there was to be a 7-foot garage, 7-story garage, which was going to be very intrusive and very obstructive. There was also in one of the plans to put an 85-foot high building. Each one of our buildings is smaller than what was put on the sector plan or any previous approvals. So when you look, and we have given to the community a presentation that shows you cannot see from the residential areas what we're doing, just because of the topography and the way it's done, the way that the way that the trees, the mature trees there, and eventually what will happen with the new trees. So we feel pretty strongly with respect to the view. We still very strongly with respect to the buffer. Let me also say there's a lot of conversation about a industrial use. I would like to note again, we are asking for approval of this application under the TACE zone. In there is a table of uses that allows for commercial uses and allows for industrial uses. We would not, there's another process that talks about permitting and what you do afterwards. But here we have not said we are doing industrial warehouse or distribution warehouse. What we have said is that we will be in accord with one of the uses that is allowed, under the TACE zone. The other thing I think I heard from some of the community members was concern about air pollution and traffic. You may recall, those who have been around a while, this was a significantly larger project when it was under the 2007 plan. There was significantly more residential, significantly more commercial, significantly more everything. And then the county passed the 2035 plan. What that did was move this area from a regional urban center to a local center, and significantly reduce what was going to be in here. At one point, it was thought that there was going to be a transit center, that there might be a metro. All of that has gone away. So in fact, because of the reductions of density, what you're going to see is less pollution, less traffic than you would if the original development had occurred. Let me then, think I've talked about all, but I'm going to save this one, and this one is on a personal note and is probably of most concern to me. I have been in this county since 1968. I've been a land use attorney since 2007, and before that, I was chair of my zoning committee in my community. I take very, very seriously the responsibility of developers to be about a part of the communities in which they site. I loved when the resident said the planning board represents the community, represents the citizens. Well, I see that as people, individuals. I also see that as developments. I see that as businesses. If this community is going to grow and be of quality, we have to have a broad perspective on what makes up community. We take seriously our obligation as a member of this community, and I would hope that as you are looking at this case, that we would look at it broadly and understand the importance of everybody as a stakeholder being a part of this process and being valued as a part of this property. Commissioner Washington, and Mr. Chair, I was very happy to hear you talk about an expansive view of what we talk about when we talk about community. So for us, I think this project represents that kind of commitment to looking at the interests of all stakeholders. And finally, I want to say that we are doing this and we appreciate the understanding that this is inside of the zone. We are not trying to do anything that is not permitted under the zone that we have submitted our application. We have met every condition that is required, and we plan on continuing to meet those conditions as we go forward in this project. And I also commit to you, Mr. Chair and members of the board, that we will continue to have conversations with members of the community to make sure that we are being responsive, and if there are ways to improve the project, to make sure that we hear their voices and that we respond to their voices. And with that, I will conclude my remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Camp. That is, yes.
I apologize.
Turn your mic back on. Yeah, go ahead.
I apologize. I did want to make a correction on my correction. It looks like on the FAR from the 0.25, it is somewhere between 1.5 and 1.6. So staff was correct. And please accept our apology for that.
Wait, I'm not understanding. Hit me with that again. What's the correction to the correction?
So Ms. Kozak made reference to from 0.25 to 0.15, and we said to 0.19. It should stay at 0.15, as she stated.
Thank you.
Yes, and apologies for that.
Colleagues, we've heard that's your closing. That's your rebuttal in closing. So this concludes this public hearing for this matter. So unless there's any other questions under deliberation, are there any other questions that you have before we get to deliberation? Any other questions you have for the applicant or staff? If not, under deliberation, I hear, let me start. I hear loud and clear some of the concerns from folks in the community. I appreciate their coming forward and making their voice heard in this way. And it's difficult. I think that again, the zone is the zone, and they have the applicant has rights to develop according to the zone and with the uses in the zone. And I think part of our job in a situation like this is to make sure that we are minimizing any neighborhood impact. Hearing from the applicant as she talked about the screening and the fence line and the woods and the multiple layers of fencing, that satisfies me in terms of minimizing the negative impact on the folks in the community. And I know it's difficult for folks in the community, and it's a lot nicer to be living next to the woods than it is the warehouse. But the MXT zone allows for, and we don't even know if it's going to be a warehouse, but the MXT zone allows for commercial use. And so there'll be another process around that. So that's my view. My view is I believe that the applicant has met the standards to allow for us to go ahead and approve this, but I'm curious to see where you all are with this as well.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Delisa Coleman, Senior Counsel for the record. I just wanted to clarify for the board because you referenced MXT zone. This is actually in the TACE zone.
I was talking about my apologies, the former zone was MXT zone. And so
Right.
thank you for that clarification, Ms. Coleman. I appreciate that. Mr. Giraldo, you had
Yeah,
something you wanted to.
I wanted to share the comments of Commissioner Washington and yours. And what I wanted to mention to the developer, to Ms. Camp, is whether or not, I mean, I understand, and the board understands, I think we all do, in terms of the concern of the community, particularly in the Westphalia Park side. So one suggestion and the concern of the residents with regards to the size of the building and what they have to look at. And I was wondering whether or not, Ms. Camp, the developer considered at all putting up a green wall.
We can't hear you, Ms. Camp.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We put up, and through deliberation with staff, we have a retaining wall and we have a noise wall, and then we have a fence. And then we added on, we actually could have removed the trees. We kept those trees, and then we have a berm, I think, down under there that kind of make, not a berm. Okay, I'm incorrect. And then we added the trees. So that's what we tried to do to mitigate any kind of negative impact between the commercial and the residential.
Okay, I was talking about the big wall, whether or not, you see that in other areas where they turn the concrete wall into greenery that sort of adds, takes away from the heaviness of the concrete.
Yeah, one of the things, and I'm not sure ours is concrete, I don't know about the materials. I will say that their lower walls, these walls are 6 foot. They had to be under 6 foot under the zoning ordinance. And there are actually 2 with a plaza that even makes it further away from the residential as required by this zoning. I don't think, because of the way it is behind the existing trees, Commissioner, that you would even ever see that kind of foliage because it's covered up by the trees.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Anything else in deliberation? Okay, do we have enough information to make a decision? If so, what's your pleasure, board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the findings of staff to include the technical corrections as noted on the record by both staff and the applicant with respect to the FAR or FAR, in addition to deleting on pages 12 through 16 all references to the CSP, as it is not a conformance finding required as a condition of approval, in addition to the amended finding as outlined in applicant exhibit number 1. And with that, I move approval of DET-2022-001, variance to section 27-4204D3 and TCP 2-029-12-16, along with the condition as outlined in staff's report and is further modified by applicant exhibit number 1.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Washington, a second by Vice Chair Bailey. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Yep, Commissioner Washington.
I'm sorry. I was just going to, I guess, double down on my earlier comments and thank the citizens and thank the applicant as well. We sometimes, in the spirit of all of us trying to get to the best possible place for our county, find ourselves where it's not as delicate a walk as we would like it to be, but progress nonetheless. So thank you, everybody, for your engagement.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'd like to associate myself with Commissioner Washington's comments. That's exactly what I was going to say. Maybe not those same words, but to thank the citizens and the applicant. I do know that the applicant It's not where they started originally. So they did listen to the citizens and made some adjustments to their plans. And so I want to thank them for that. You did not satisfy all of the citizens, that's for sure. But your efforts in working and listening to the citizens, I want to commend you on that. And I want to thank the citizens for coming. You know, we do hear you, and we do know that the applicants know that we listen to you as well. So thank you so very much for coming and sharing your comments.
Well said, both of you, and I certainly associate myself with all those remarks. If there's no further discussion on the motion, I will call the roll. Commissioner Washington.
I vote aye.
Vice Chair Bailey.
Vote aye.
Commissioner Giraldo.
I vote aye.
Still on mute. There we go. I vote aye as well. The ayes have it 4-0. Thanks to everybody for taking the time to be heard on this case. Ms. Camp, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Hunt, Ms. Kosak, everybody. Folks, this concludes all the items that I see on today's agenda. Mr. Hunt, is there anything further to come before us?
The Chair, there are no additional items before the planning board today. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you. Then without objection, folks, without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of the day.
Bye.